The following is a Spirit Street production.
All right, everybody. Football is right around the corner. And Big 12, we're kind of one of those conferences that people are kind of saying, yeah, they're maybe the third, fourth best conference. We don't believe that here in the Big 12. So we're having a thing. It's called Big 12 Insiders Game Day, just talking about the Big 12 conference, talking about what's going on with football. It's going to be exciting. We're going to do this every week of the football season. We got 4 separate publishers from 4 different universities today. We're going to be talking a lot of Big 12 stuff. This is the Big 12 Insiders Game Day.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, everybody. Welcome to first edition of Big 12 Insiders Game Day. This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. We have got some guests here today. Jared Johnson with covering Texas Tech, Mike Casaza covering West Virginia, Alex Busey covering Iowa State, and McLean Baxley covering Oklahoma State. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Big B?
I am good, man. I am good. I'm ready for football. All this realignment talk and all this other stuff in the offseason. It just got so worrisome. We'll cover one of those little topics here today, but I'm just ready to kick the damn football off so we can get this thing going.
I think we all are.
Yep.
Just ready to get going, man. So
I can't talk anybody into 12 more weeks of off season or preseason. No.
Yeah.
I got
talking season, baby. Oh my goodness. It was just so much. And well, you know what? I was going to ask this later, but I'm just going to ask it right at the very beginning. What in the hell was, number one, did it come out? Why did the Big 12 let this come out about UConn, possibly UConn getting into the conference last week? We had all offseason. It's not like this is the very beginning of these conversations. I'll just start with you, Mike. Why the timing? I thought the timing could not have been worse unless it came out sometime today. It was just absolutely insane.
Well, very little happens that's a secret, it seems like, in the new Big 12 regime, which is okay. Yeah. I like transparency, so that's good. I think there's always like calculated leaks, and when it comes from certain corners of the country, you kind of have an idea of who's doing it and why. I don't know. Sometimes I'm a skeptic, and maybe you guys can tell me this too, but like if I want someone to know about a party and I can't get in touch with that person, sometimes I tell some other people because it makes it a little bit more urgent. Maybe that was like a shot across the bow of some schools that would lean into the conversation. They're like, oh, wait a second. You're talking to UConn. Why not us? And maybe we should take this more seriously. Maybe the Big 12 is going to expand. And I wonder if that was a conversation that was with UConn, but might have been intended for more audiences. Other schools that maybe they're in another conference right now, but perhaps they would entertain the idea of moving to the Big 12 if and when that opportunity arises. But I'm just a skeptic, though.
Yeah, I know last year, was it that Gonzaga was a team that, was kind of rumored to go to the Big 12. They were talking and conversations were looming there. Obviously, Gonzaga doesn't have football, but for other sports, and now kind of going the opposite direction of the country up in the Northeast. So they're I think it's interesting that they're kind of letting the door open for teams to join, for teams to come to the Big 12, and just kind of who's going to be the first to jump if any team does.
Yeah, I think my reaction to it was just that Brett Yormark loves realignment. He's made that pretty clear since he took over as the Big 12 commissioner. I also just think he kind of, and maybe my read on this is wrong. If you guys want to tell me I'm an idiot, be my guest. I feel like he's probably been told several times by Big 12 decision makers, we don't want UConn, but he keeps trying to go back. And because he has so much power within the league with the success of bringing in the 4 Pac-12 schools, moving ahead of the Pac-12 for the television contract, which probably saved the league as much as anything. I think that they're just bringing him back to the table, and they're kind of like at Christmas when like the little kids or the grandkids come up to the big kid table or the table with the aunts, uncles, and you keep kind of like trying to shoo them away and go play on their own. And I don't think that this is going to come to fruition, but if it does for UConn, like good for them. They're going to take the opportunity to secure their future with greater revenue at a time when, that's the leading cause of movement for everything in college sports, especially with the House settlement kind of coming along.
Yeah, I honestly didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. I'm all caught up getting ready for football season, kind of like you were saying, Big B. But I agree kind of with what Mike was saying, but kind of a different way. Like maybe just floating it, leaking it out there just to see what the reaction was from the public. You know, how much do people like this? How much do fans want this? But also, yeah, kind of like some of the other guys were saying, you know, better jump, better get to the table, better get your chair before the music stops with realignment. But I don't know if it's really, I don't know what kind of effect that really has.
Yeah, I kind of took the approach of kind of what Alec is saying. Throw it out there and see if there's something to bite. It does seem like Brett Yormark is in love with realignment. I don't know why, but he is. But at the same time, yes, I agree. He's going fishing for a UConn. I kind of like what you're saying too, Mike, about the whole, you know, maybe we should take it seriously. But then again, a phone call. You can make a phone call and keep that quiet if you need it to be quiet. You could do that in this day and age. It's not like he doesn't have the number to every athletic director in the United States of America. If he wanted to make that phone call and keep it quiet, I feel like that could be done. I felt like this was intentional. I don't even know why. It just, hey, you know what? This is what we're planning on doing or wanting to do. It didn't make sense. And again, the timing of it, I just thought was unnecessary for the Big 12, especially in a season, and we'll just get into it, is moving around with the realignment stuff with Texas and Oklahoma leaving. The timing of it, it couldn't have been worse because, look, the national perception of the Big 12 right now is that we can't survive, or it's not going to survive, or it's not going to be nearly as good without them. And I just don't feel that that's the truth, Jared. I just, again, I know we've talked about this before, but I think we need to talk about it again. Strength will be in the numbers. Strength will be in, you know, everybody being good, you know, or as many teams being good as possible. I feel like that's the way to move forward, because you're not going to create a national brand. You're not going to create a blue blood program anytime soon. I mean, that takes hundreds of years to be able to do, or at least 100 years to be able to do. And so that's not happening anytime soon. So strength is in the numbers. Have as many good teams be as good as possible, and that's the way to move forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be disingenuous and act like UT and OU leaving is not a big deal, because it is in terms of revenue and all kinds of things and excitement. I mean, that would be disingenuous. But and I agree with you that a blue blood program won't just come out of nowhere from the Big 12. But if somebody, whoever makes it to the playoffs, one, maybe two teams could make it to the playoffs and make a deep run and maybe stack some success over a couple of years, that would be a program that could gain a bigger national following and generate more revenue, or at least more eyeballs on Big 12 games. And then just having a competitive, exciting brand of football would be huge as well.
Do y'all ever cover the UConn football game?
Kind of remotely.
I still have like Randy Edsel PTSD. He blocked me on Twitter. I don't know how or why, so like I kind of have a bias, but it's not exciting. I had to look up who their coach was, and I was like, it's still Bob Biacco, and like, no, he got fired a long time ago. It's Jim Mora. That's a big name you think you should know, and like that's just up there and out in the middle of nowhere. And like I don't know what it is about UConn apart from the all sports thing, which makes me, I mean, obviously the number doesn't work because you have 15, where in basketball you have 17, whereas basketball you have a nice thing going with the other 15 teams and not double round robin, but you get that little split of 10 teams and 5 teams twice. How does it work with football? I have no idea. So there's going to be somebody else in there, but I just don't get the UConn part. And it's kind of the opposite of what we're talking about here. Like the Big 12 is old parts, new parts, and even the new parts are kind of like on an upward trajectory. Like you can look at Arizona State and say, oh, they stink, but that's kind of an exciting program if they get things going there. Utah's been good for a while. Houston, throw them up in the Power 5 and see what happens. Good coach now there. You just get the general feeling a lot of these programs have good things going just in the football sense. And then now meet UConn. Like that just doesn't add up to me. Like you're saying, the timing, Brian, is just like really curious because you're trying to celebrate this new thing and all these programs that are not geographically fit, but like they kind of make a little bit more sense now as you've added teams. This is a fun, even conference, except for this one outlier in the Northeast that has been relevant for a long, long time. And like, it just didn't add up to me. I'm still curious as to how or why this came up.
Maybe Yormark's a big fan of the Civil Conflict Trophy.
Bring it back, yeah.
Maybe he's just a big fan of the civil conflict trip. He wants to bring it back. I don't know. I just don't think the move makes much sense for the Big 12 on any level, to be honest with you. I don't understand how it's going to increase revenue unless it allows them to go back to a negotiating table with Fox or ESPN. And like I said earlier, like if it doesn't increase revenue, you're not going to get athletic directors, chancellors, or presidents to vote yes on this. Like if they see that they're going to get in more TV revenue from this, or they're going to increase profits in any stretch of the imagination, they'll vote them in. But I just don't see that happening, McLean, at least not at this point.
Yeah, we've seen the other side of that with, we're talking about football, but for all the other sports, obviously UConn, two-time defending men's basketball champion, their women's basketball program is really good. And for these other non-revenue sports, our teams from Arizona and Colorado going to want to travel up to Storrs, Connecticut on Tuesday night to play volleyball or to play women's, even men's and women's basketball. I mean, that's just a cross-country trek that's already far, going from Central Florida to the Arizonas and Utah, but to add another layer to that, another team that you'll play in an extra game or an extra time, just an added cost that I don't see a lot of athletic directors jumping on. We've seen with Clemson and some of the Big Ten schools, Ohio State, and so kind of cut back on programs and cut back on funding. And that's something that I think athletic directors would be interested in if there is an addition to going all the way up northeast for another cross country trip, which just isn't very enticing for a lot of directors.
So we're going to switch gears here. Enough of this UConn stuff because it literally is just driving me insane. Can't take it. Switch gears. Let's get back to the football. So we're opening up the season this week on Thursday. This is going to come out on Thursday. So top players in the conference. Alec, I'll start with you. And we don't have to go down 75 different people. We know kind of who the top players are. Is there anybody that you see that maybe people aren't talking about right now that might be one of the top players in the conference this year?
Should I just throw my watch up? No, I'm kidding. No, I'll actually stick with Colorado. I think a lot of people are kind of looking at the big names on the Colorado roster: Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Shiloh Sanders at safety, but they added BJ Green, a transfer from Arizona State, on the interior of the defensive line last year. Obviously, Colorado's issues were in the trenches. I think that addition could prove to be really big for them.
Yeah,
I'm kind of skeptical about what's actually possible for Colorado this season. When you listen to some people who pay way more attention to roster building and transfer portal additions and all those things because they cover it nationally, and they seem to say that Colorado's roster this year is better than it was a year ago, and their schedule is going to be easier this year than it was a year ago too. So maybe 8 wins is possible for this Colorado team, but if that's going to be possible, it's going to be because of guys like BJ Green on the interior of the defensive line, 5-star left tackle, Jordan Seaton coming in as a freshman. I think those are 2 guys, Mike, who aren't really being talked about for reasons why Colorado could kind of rise up to a potential postseason bid.
I'm going in with like no expectations of Colorado because it's going to be entertained no matter what. I mean, they could disband that thing about the 10th game because they're 0-10 and all of a sudden he quits and goes on sabbatical somewhere, or they could be 10-0 in the thick of the playoffs, and I'll be entertained the entire time. They have talent. There's no doubt about that. I think last season was it happened. There's some lessons to be learned there, but you're right, Alec. Their roster, their top line is like a lot better, and I think they have the depth to do it now this year too. I kind of I don't know. I kind of look around at different programs like off that top shelf and try to figure out where things are. And I've done like a 180 on UCF. I didn't get the hype at all. And then they got KJ Jefferson. I was like, okay, that makes some sense. And I look at what they're doing. They're going to run the ball like crazy with their running backs. And they added Boone too. Like they're going to be good running the ball. They were already really good running the ball. And then their defense, like last year, had issues, but their front line on defense, their defensive line with I'm trying to think of the tackle's name right now. With Michael Lawrence there at defensive end and Lee Hunter as a defensive tackle, they're going to get after quarterbacks and they're going to be able to stop the run. And I just think about Jefferson and like a Gus Malzahn offense. That's going to be fun too, I think, because what we mentioned the running backs there. Harvey's going to be very good. The receiver Hudson's going to be good too. I think there's some chance for fireworks there that I think that no one has really talked about because the quarterback talent in the league, some of the receivers in the league, the running back talent in the league is high level. UCF has that. And then I'm always struck by how good the defensive linemen in the Big 12 are, first team, second team on some of these teams. And they have 2 of the better defensive linemen in the country. It's a good place to start. I just think they're going to be good because they have some overlooked players.
I'm excited to see what Arizona does. They came in last year, had a lot of good talented dudes and they brought them back, their quarterback, Noah Fafita, and a couple of receivers that just really good skill players that did well in the Pac-12 last year. And what do they do here in the Big 12 and, playing new teams, playing new conference? How can they adjust and can they, continue that trajectory as they were last year with a different coach, with different schemes, with different personnel around them? I'm just excited to see what those guys can do. It's very fun to watch, especially in the bowl game against Oklahoma down in Texas.
Yeah.
I really agree with what Mike said about UCF. I think that's a program, and they made some nice moves this offseason. But I try to think about or answer this kind of question if I was like a defensive coordinator and I had to game plan for offense or offensive coordinator, that kind of thing. And Avery Johnson at Kansas State, I just feel like with the way Kansas State the program is, that he's a problem. I think he should be talked about more as I don't know how much he's talked about. I get tunnel vision with the team I cover around fall camp, but I feel like obviously they're one of the favorites in the conference, but I think he might be the Big 12 player of the year when it's all said and done. I think he's that talented, really good player. Not necessarily all these high-level, high-rated guys around him, but great program, great system. They're going to win a lot of games, and he's going to be in a position to make a lot of big plays when Kansas State needs it. I think he'll make them.
Can I stick with K-State? I feel like everyone talks about all the great running back depth in the league, and everyone talks about the addition of Dylan Edwards this spring out of the portal. I think DJ Giddens is overlooked among all the great backs in the Big 12, behind Ollie Gordon, RJ Harvey, the two guys
Taj Brooks.
Taj Brooks, all of those guys. I think he is drastically overlooked. The guy who rushed for over 1,000 yards last season, replacing Deuce Vaughn, did it admirably. I think he's overlooked, and I think the addition of Dylan Edwards really kind of made people forget how good he was, and then the emergence of Avery Johnson. At least that's my opinion, being I know you're close to that K-State program.
Yeah, the thing about it is that he can also catch the ball out of the backfield. I mean, he does it all. I'm not saying that he's an all-world running back. I'm just saying he could do more than run the football. And a lot of it is because he's a really, really quiet kid. So he's not – I'm not saying people are out there braggadocious, but if you go interview him, if you ever tried to interview him, he doesn't even say much. He gives you 1- and 2-word answers, not being rude, anything like that. He's a polite guy. It's just, the way that it is. But I think he's also one of the best running backs in college football that nobody's talking about right now. And I think he's going to be a guy. You guys are right. You're right, Alec. Yeah, he's very, very good. Going to end up surprising a lot of people. But we'll see. K-State got some question marks on the offensive line.
Yeah.
They almost talk about it like it's just automatically going to happen. I'm like, hold on a second, man. Offensive line, it's not just something that just happens. You got to get in there and prove it. But definitely all key players that you guys brought up. I'm going to take a quick break here. It'll be quick. We'll be right back on the other side of this. We'll dive into a little bit of the playoff and then make some picks. So stick around towards the end, people, because we're going to make a picks on all these games this week. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
See, super quick. So thanks everybody again for being here for Big 12 Insiders Game Day. Mike is trying to get back in. We see him down there, but as soon as he's back, we'll get him back into the room, people. So we appreciate everybody being in here. Again, remember to like, follow, subscribe, leave all those comments. Again, Big 12 Insiders Game Day. We are having a ball so far. First edition. We appreciate everybody being in here. Let's get into the playoff here, McLean. So 12-team playoff for the first year. I think it's outstanding. There's some people that don't like it because there are a lot of people, some people are traditionalists. I think this is outstanding. Look, it is what it is. It was at 4. 4, in my opinion, was always terrible because some conference champion was getting left out. How can that be? We saw it last year. I think 12 is a great number, going to give some other teams opportunities. Now, the Big 12 per se, I'm not sure how many teams are actually going to get in. I think it has to be 2 if we have good season, but you know how that's going to play nationally. But overall, how do you feel about the 12-team playoff?
I'm excited for it. More teams, more games, more fun, more meaningful games in December and January, which is exciting. Whether they're teams that are blowing each other out like we've seen in recent years, or they're competitive games like we hope for. I think more teams involved is a good thing. As it pertains to the Big 12, I mean, as you've seen, the last 4 or 5 years, there's so much parity in this league where teams are going to the Big 12 championship with 2, 3 losses, and so if they get that 4th loss or that 3rd loss down Arlington, that could be destructive and ruin their chances of getting 2 teams in the Big 12 in the 12 playoffs this year. But there's enough talent in this league that they could foresee getting 2 in there. But I think it's exciting overall. I think 12 is a good number. I mean, I'm sure that in a couple of years we'll be talking about the 16-team playoff, which I think should be the max when that time comes. But definitely excited for this first year of the 12 team.
I'm super excited for it. I think a great example of why to be excited for it is Florida State lost on Saturday in week 0, and their season's not over.
Right.
I certainly understand the people that love the stakes of every single game, meaning so much, like it did in the 4-team playoff. I think that was one of the things that made college football so exciting, Jarrett, was that if you lost one game, your hopes of winning a national title or getting to a marquee postseason opportunity might be gone. But I think the counter to that is, like McLean said, there's going to be so many more games come November, the last couple of weeks of the season that mean so much more. And there's going to be so many teams that are playing for more. Instead of having 6 or 8 teams fighting for those spots, you might have 20 to 25. I don't know if we'll get to 30 come October that you feel like can kind of sneak into the CFP, but I think you could be around 20, Jared. I think that's so fun for so many teams across the country, even if in a certain sense it's just like false hope, because a lot of those teams are going to have an opportunity to advance far into the CFP. I don't think it's going to create new champions, but I think just the idea of that many teams competing for the CFP is so fun.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think it's a great thing. I mean, just philosophically look at it. What do the coaches and the players tell us that don't make it in the playoffs? A lot of them opt out. A lot of the coaches make coaching changes. I'm not judging that. I understand it, but they're telling us it's not that important to them, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if they're not playing, if they're not even participating in it, and that's just the truth. Now, I still love. I watched more bowl games for some reason this last year than I have. It was fantastic. But the playoffs are very exciting, and I get I do get the point. I don't agree with it, but I get the point about losing that every game means so much, Alec, like you were talking about that some fans point to. But go over to Florida State's board and see if they don't care that they lost to Georgia Tech. I mean, it was still very important. It was a huge game, So I feel like we gain more with this playoff format. I mean, look at basketball. How much has college basketball been elevated by the tournament format? It's fantastic. Now, football is not quite on that level in terms of 12 teams, but like Alex said, it probably will be expanded. And it doesn't take, just as a fan, it doesn't take anything away. I'm more excited about this season because of the new playoff format than I was a year ago. There's no doubt in my mind.
And like you were saying, Alex, there's probably still only 4 to 8 teams that can actually win the national championship. The group of 5 that gets invited to the playoff still has a low shot of winning the whole thing. Unlike March Madness or whatever, but just getting the opportunity to play it, getting more fans involved, getting more teams involved. Like I said, through November, December is exciting for the sport.
There's still a necessary.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's still a necessary talent threshold needed to win the national championship, I think is what McLean is saying. And last year's a perfect example of this, where it's so ironic that throughout the first 9-10 years of the CFP, there was maybe 2 seasons where you felt like people got left out that maybe shouldn't have been left out. And ironically, it was the first year and the last year. The first year, obviously, one of at least TCU or Baylor in 2014, 2015. And then last year, obviously, Georgia/Florida State, they both probably felt like they deserved an opportunity. I think Alabama felt like they deserved an opportunity after beating Georgia, who was number 1 for so long. I think those teams now have an opportunity to continue to play. And I think that's why it's so exciting. And those are all teams last year that you felt like could win a national championship, and they're going to continue to play this year. And I think, there's so much changing in college football this year, but I think what people are more excited than anything about is the 12-team CFP.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? There will be some underdog that goes on a run. I'm not saying wins a national championship, but maybe wins a playoff game or two because
Oh,
they
for
have
sure.
some free quarterback or they have some new scheme that's given defensive coordinators problem or vice versa. There'll be some team soon that had, like people were saying, oh, they shouldn't be in the playoffs, and they win a couple of games and they'll be the darlings, and that'll be really exciting. That'll be completely foreign for college football.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we saw it 2 years ago. Look, and TCU fans are going to take this the wrong way. They had a really good team with guys with pros on their team, but that Michigan team had 27 guys that are in the National Football League currently. Like 27. So, and TCU beat them. So, yeah, there's going to be some upsets from time to time that happen. One thing that you guys mentioned, and I just want to throw this out there because I've heard it from a lot of people that they confuse this with March Madness. And they're saying, well, they're going to turn it into that. And I'm like, first of all, no, they're not. Second of all, basketball is wildly different than football. In basketball, you can get on a run. If you get a guy that's hot, that's really, really good, he can take over basketball games. And there's nothing you can do about that. In football, you can't. Football, you're not going to just get this guy that, okay, one guy is going to beat an entire football team. That isn't happening. While it can happen in basketball, doesn't happen often in basketball, but it can. And in football, it cannot. So it's not the same. It's not even remotely the same. But the premise is, and Alec, I think I'm with you. People got to get over the traditional, what it was 100 years ago. I'm sorry, man. Things change. A lot of things change. We just got to move on from what we loved before. Jarrett, you're right. The bowl games, I still watch them. Heck, I used to be a guy because I played in two and say, hey, man, if you haven't played in one, how are you telling me that it's not important? If I played football now and it wasn't in the playoff, I'd be right there with him. Yeah, I'm not playing. This isn't that important. If I was a senior or trying to go to the pros, I would be that guy too.
Jerry, you mentioned teams making a run or like upsets or a Cinderella team making it further. I think you're going to have a lot of fans across the country maybe not understand like how this works and see a lower seeded team like an 8 or a 9 seed make a run to the quarterfinals or the semifinals. But the people who really understand it like us are realizing that this thing is intentionally being misseeded, which allows for that to happen more often because you're going to have, the second best team in the country is probably going to be the runner-up in the Big Ten or the ACC, or maybe it's Notre Dame or whoever it may be. Well, that team's going to be seeded 5th most years.
Yep.
And that means that team is automatically underseeded and they play the 4th seed in the second round. So they're going to have an opportunity to potentially get to the semifinals if they, win their game against the 4th seed and presumably beat the 12th seed in that opening round at a home game. So I think that that's like kind of fun too. Now, people really understand it like myself. I think the intentionally misseeding thing is really dumb, but it's really fun for fans. And I'm a big entertainment guy. And if you're doing something for fans in the sport, that's a good thing because most of the things aren't done in fan interest, I feel like.
I do like that. Go ahead.
I was just thinking the first year of the playoffs, back when Ohio State won, they were the 4th seed, going on with a second or third string quarterback, went all the way through Alabama, went through Marcus Mariota and the Ducks and the national championship to win the national championship for Ohio State. So even in 4th seed, there was upsets and exciting games. And so we'll definitely be seeing that again, with the 12 team for sure.
I do like though that if you win your conference, you're getting rewarded for that. You know what I mean? Like if you want to, that seems right to me. I get that, like, say an Alabama who doesn't win the SEC but is clearly loaded 3 deep might be better than one of the other conference winners on paper. But I still think it's at least there's some basis, some benefit to winning your conference more than just getting in the playoffs. And then I really like that. I mean, can you imagine what would it mean to the programs we cover if they hosted a playoff game? I mean, can you imagine how exciting that would be? I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. That's the part that I'm looking forward to. And that's kind of where I'm getting to now is with the next question is, I talked to Rich Clark, college football, the executive director of college football at Big 12 Media Days, the college football playoff, I should say. And, I kind of put it out there because we've heard it. We've all heard it. The SEC is getting 5 teams. The Big Ten is getting 4 teams, and the ACC and power or a Power 4 or non-Power 4, I should say,
G4.
going to get one team, and the Big 12 will get one team. And I'm like, so let's talk about how many teams are going to get in from this conference. How many do we think are going to get in allowed? And of course, his comment to me was, well, everybody's going to get in on merit. And I just kind of looked at him like, okay, guy, let's, I mean, I get it. You have to say that, but let's talk about it. But the Big 12, look, I think this might be one of those years, McLean, where the Big 12 might get one, depending on how good the second place team is in the conference. They could get two. But I think for the Big 12 consistently to get 2 or even 3, they're going to have to start winning some of these playoff games. It can't just be, oh, we're going to put 2 Big 12 teams in and they go and lose every year. I think they're going to have to start winning some of these games. And if they do, then maybe they will get put on, not necessarily a pedestal, but just get a little bit more respect.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't won a playoff game yet, right?
Right.
You know, they're probably their best chance was Texas last year.
Well, they won. TCU did.
TCU beat Michigan.
Yeah. People forget about that because the next game was tough for the Horned Frogs against Georgia. But yeah, so they've won one game in 10 years in the playoff system. So yeah, I mean, but I think the problem for the Big 12 is that we talk about the parity. We talk about how there's not 2 or 3 teams that are just so much better than the rest. Like you see with the SEC. The SEC, there's Georgia, Alabama, LSU are like clearly above the rest of the pack and can get in with one or 2 losses. Where you can say Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Utah might be in a threshold, but then you're going to have Iowa State, UCF, Arizona is like right there that can get those upset wins, get those road games and make what should be on paper a 1 or 2 loss season into a 3 or 4 loss season, which hurts the national odds and national perception of the team and of the conference.
I think what's also really interesting about it too, with how many teams are going to get in this year from each league, is no one really knows because they've never done this before. It's like, how are they going to decide it? And also beyond that, I think it's really interesting, like, what are they going to reward? And for me, you talked about for the Big 12 to get more teams in the future, they need to win CFP games. I would counter that. I would say they need to win non-conference games against other power conference schools.
That's true. Yeah.
Yes.
And that starts this weekend for me. Like, you've got West Virginia hosting Penn State. You've got TCU traveling out to Stanford. Next weekend, you've got a lot more in the Big 12. The Big 12 needs to start winning those games. If they can win those games, that's so good for the league standing and in their view. And I think you kind of saw it last year to a certain extent because the ACC did really, really well against the SEC early in the season. It kind of hurt the pedigree or the perception of the SEC early in the season, and they ended up kind of regaining it as the season prolonged. But that, to me, is what's really important for the Big 12, Jarrett.
I think that's a great point. I was going to say that it's also a counter to the traditionalist saying, oh, I miss every game having so much weight on it. Well, it does. Non-conference is going to be important. The optics do matter with all people like us talking heads, talking about who should get in, who shouldn't, and all that. I think best case scenario, I think Big 12 gets one team in, if I had to say, gun to my head. But the best case scenario is for the top 2 teams, whoever goes to the Big 12 championship, to have 2 losses between them, maybe each have one hiccup, and they play an exciting game that is watched by a lot of people. And it makes it really hard on the committee. Like, oh, they lost, but it was a close one. I'd like to see what they could do in the playoffs, because I think that's probably going to matter. But like Alex said, we really don't know what's going to be merit for these teams. I don't want to be cynical and say that somebody is pulling the strings behind the scenes saying, hey, we need this many SEC and Big Ten teams, but I can't help but put my tinfoil hat on a little bit too and worry about that. But I think best case scenario is for it to not be so ultra competitive in terms of where there's the 2 teams that go to the Big 12 championship kind of kick butt for most of the year, to be honest.
No, I think it's a great point. Exactly what you brought up. I think that was one of the reasons Florida State didn't get in. Look, yes, they lost their quarterback. They basically lost their 2 quarterbacks. Their starting quarterback, who happened to be the star player, and then they lost their backup. They play in an ACC championship game against it. Look, I'm a Louisville fan because I grew up there. I'm a diehard, but their schedule helped them out tremendously last year. and Florida State didn't look good against them. The game was basically unwatchable, to be honest.
It was terrible.
And the committee was like, "Oh, we're going to put that in? No, we're not." So, you're right. Optics absolutely matter. So, well, we're going to take another really quick break here. Our man Mike Casaza, he had a lightning strike, and it flickered. I don't think it hit his house, but they have some bad weather, so I don't think he's going to be able to make it back to us. But we're going to take a really quick break, and then we're going to pick these games for the weekend, 16 games. Not too challenging, but there's some out there. There might be a couple of upsets, so we will be right back in just a second, and we'll pick these games for you guys.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley, Jared Johnson, McLean Baxley, Alec Busey. We had Mike Casaza, like I mentioned before. He might come back, but I don't think so. He's had some outage. They had some bad weather down there in West Virginia, so we will see if he can make it back, but I'm not counting on it. But let's get to picking these games, guys. Look, Thursday, it starts off, and I'll just go in the order that I've got them up here. New Hampshire at UCF.
Are we picking these against the spread?
No, not going to do the spread. The reason being is because, first of all, now look, it's interesting about that because, 2 or 3 years ago, you couldn't find spreads on FCS games. You couldn't even get into it. You couldn't find those out there. And now that betting is everywhere, but you know what? I always call it sucker bets because I'm like, if you get up, the spread's 40 and you got your fours in the game and then somebody scores a touchdown, it's when I'm trying to burn my house down because I'm so mad. So I don't even deal with it. But no, just picking the games. New Hampshire going to UCF. I don't see UCF having any problems with them. And then we can just include Lindenwood at Kansas, the same type of deal, and Southern Utah at Utah. Those 3 games, I see UCF, Kansas, and Utah just kind of walking through those guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're KU, that's one that you obviously want to win. They go on the road and play at Illinois next week. So I know that that's obviously one of those games that we talked about out of conference that KU needs to win, even though Illinois is expected to be near the bottom of the Big Ten. I don't know who UCF plays next week, and I don't know who Utah plays next week. I guess Utah plays Baylor in a Big 12 game. So yeah, I think that for KU, getting Jalen Daniels through the week healthy is really important.
And the one game you left off, Big B, is that North Dakota State and Colorado game.
I was getting to that. I just wanted to go through these walkover games first.
Gotcha. I do not think that's a walkthrough game. I've got the Bison going into Boulder and getting the upset.
Same
Thursday night.
I've got Colorado winning.
See, I do too. I think Colorado's going to win, and the reason being is because they've heard it all. I mean, since the schedule was announced, they've heard they're going to lose this game. They're going to lose this game. North Dakota State's going to be so physical. I believe Colorado might have fixed their offensive line. I'm not sold on their defensive line yet. We'll see. But I think Colorado might have fixed the offensive line so they'll be able to actually run the football. And that's something that they literally couldn't do last year is run the football. Their skill position players are going to be better than North Dakota State's. They just are, period, end of story. But in the trenches, can they be better? And I think on the offensive side, it's going to be, and I think they'll be able to run the football, and that's why I think Colorado's going to win. Because let's just be honest, guys. If Colorado doesn't win this game, what are we going to – what will anybody be able to talk about? We won't be able to talk about. We'll talk about how bad they are, and that'll be the end of it. And honestly, I don't want it to be the end of it. I don't.
I don't know. I'm going to have to disagree with you on that because I think everybody knows what a good program North Dakota State is. So I don't think I know losing at home that Colorado should win that game, but I have North Dakota State winning too. I had to pre-record it for our radio show coming up this week, and I don't have a detailed breakdown of both of the rosters. I know a couple of or several of Colorado's players, but I know North Dakota State shows up to play. And they have a history of success. And I consider that compared to some of the chaos at Colorado. I just think, especially early on, I think you want to catch Colorado early on or late in the season because I'm not convinced on their depth which is what we're like when they get in November and they have to play some tough road conference games. I don't know if they're going to have the depth remaining to do that. And then early on, just the chaos of throwing all these new players together, which I know a lot of teams are dealing with, but not necessarily North Dakota State. They're going to do what they do. So I think North Dakota State's going to win that game. I do.
I've done a lot of research this week on the Dakotas. Oklahoma State's playing South Dakota State, and so I've done a lot of research on the Dakotas, and there's a lot of big boys out there. And the problem for Colorado last year was that offensive and defensive line play, just not being able to get pressure, and not being able to withstand pressure and keep Shadur Sanders upright. And I think North Dakota State has the big boys in the trenches to get to the quarterback and keep theirs straight up. And so I think that's going to be. They say that games are won and lost in the trenches. I think that's going to be true Thursday night. Whereas, like I said, the Bison just having that, they're together more. They, have more reps together. They, they don't have a full team of transfers that just got here in March and this offseason. So I think it's going to be a close game. They're not going to go in there and blow them out, I don't think. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting game Thursday.
I like Colorado just because I think that they have more talent. And I think talent kind of wins out in those opportunities. And also, I think it's worth pointing out that, while North Dakota State enters the season as a preseason number 2 team, I believe, in the FCS, it's not the same North Dakota State it was for the last decade. Craig Bohl's been at Wyoming for a while. Chris Kleinman's been at K-State for a while. They lost Matt Entz to USC as a linebackers coach this offseason. They lost the defensive coordinator to Northwestern, David Braun, who's now head coach at Northwestern after surprisingly winning 8 games a year ago there under their adverse circumstances. I just think that Colorado's a better roster. And I think that, side point, it's really good for the Big 12 if Colorado does find a way to win 8 games. They're going to be mainstream news for as long as they're doing that. You saw it last year. They started 4-0. They were the talking point of the sport. It's really good for the Big 12 that doesn't have that brand, doesn't have the helmet to attract casual viewers every weekend, if Colorado does continue to do that for the league. So if you're a Big 12 fan and you hate Colorado and you hate Deion, I certainly get it. I respect that opinion, but also understand that it's really good for the conference if they do find success. So I think Colorado wins, starts 1-0, and then they've got a big game in week 2 against Nebraska on the road.
Yep, I agree totally. Look, the biggest star in the Big 12 is Deion Sanders. That's just a fact. You don't have to like it, but it's just a fact. And for the conference, it's better if they do well. Friday night, we got TCU going to Stanford. I don't think Stanford's very good. I think TCU this is a good big game. Alec, you mentioned it earlier. Big game for the conference. Just for perception alone. I know it's crazy to say Stanford's in the ACC, but they are. And I think TCU's got to go win this game. It's on the road. Like I said, I don't think Stanford's great, but I think they'll be better than what they were last year. And I think TCU's got a lot to prove. Stubbed their toe after, going to the national championship game. They basically got destroyed, and it was just a hangover effect until the next season. So I think this is a big bounce back year. They got to start on Friday.
Yeah, I think TCU will win this game, but I do think that Stanford has a really, really good player. Receiver Alec Manor, I believe that's how you say his name. Led the team in receptions last year, had over 1,000 receiving yards for the Cardinal. That'll be a tough cover. Obviously, we know how much TCU struggled in the secondary last season at various points. I'm questionable about how good Josh Hoover is at quarterback. And I also think that this is a really big game for Sonny Dykes. After missing a bowl game last year, you don't want to start 0-1 on the season against a team that you're probably better than. You're a 10-point favorite, roughly. This is a game that I think TCU has to win, McLean.
I think they will. I think Josh Hoover, he's a young kid that, kind of he's obviously not, NFL ready right now, but he's a guy that can go out there and make plays and send plays with his legs and do enough with his arm to keep the Horned Frogs around. I think TCU goes down to California and gets some with a win.
Yeah, I think TCU wins, but starting off the season on the road like this against a team that does have somewhat comparable talent, at least. I mean, you got to throw that out there. That's difficult. I mean, it is. I'm very curious about TCU. I mean, I grew up in the Metroplex. My dad played ball for TCU. Texas Tech and TCU recruit a lot of the same players. I'm very familiar with the program, and I have no idea if they're going to be what kind of team they're going to be in terms of record. But you mentioned the hangover. I mean, they had a hangover last year, but they also lost a lot of the key players that took them to the national championship game. So Sonny Dykes he did a good job of hitting the transfer portal and helping augment that team that made that national championship run. But can he actually build the program up with his guys?
Right.
I think that question remains. And I don't know. It's weird to say that a coach that just took his team to the national championship, especially a program, like you said earlier, like TCU, which isn't a helmet school, that might be on the hot seat. But, I mean, another season where they don't even go to a bowl game, I think his seat does get really hot, to be honest. And so it's I think that program is interesting to watch because I think that would help the Big 12 as well if TCU could be a better program, or at least what we're used to, how they were under Patterson, a consistently good program.
Yeah, well, here's the thing about it, and I'll just talk about it and just say, look, under Gary Patterson, if they can get rid of him, and I know there was some lean years at the end, but if they can get rid of him, they can get rid of anybody. And you come up with 2 years where you're not as good. Look, those were Gary Patterson's players that went to the national championship game. Now, Sonny Dykes coached them, don't get me wrong, but he didn't replace them. Not only, you just mentioned it, Jared, we knew how good those guys were. There's several of those guys that are currently in the NFL. You didn't think that you were going to have to replace them, or you didn't do enough to replace them to know how good those guys really were. Maybe that's something there. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully this is a bounce back year. Let's get into Saturday a little bit. Obviously, we know the big game. I'll save that towards the end. McLean, you mentioned Oklahoma State against South Dakota State. Look, South Dakota State's really good. I mean, they just are. However, Oklahoma State, again, one of the more underrated teams, in my opinion, in the country. I think they should be able to handle them at home.
Yeah, I mean, they've been preparing for this game since January, and especially, this fall, they've been treating them like a regular, FBS team, like the Power 5 team. They've been training and preparing for them like, it's a conference game or whatever. They're taking them really seriously, which is one of the problems, last year with, the season opening against Arkansas, and then that week 3 blowout loss to South Alabama, 2 teams that were in lower classifications and lower divisions. And they just, those games were closer than different than they should have been. They're taking the Jackrabbit seriously, and I think Oklahoma State has enough talent and enough experience to get past this game, knowing the significance of it.
I mentioned earlier that North Dakota State is in the program that they were for the last decade. That's because South Dakota State is that program now. Back-to-back FCS national champions. Last time a back-to-back FCS national champion went on the road against a power conference school to open the season. 2007, Appalachian State opened at Michigan, upset the Wolverines. History won't repeat itself, but I do think South Dakota State covers a 9.5-point spread and makes it uncomfortable.
Oh, you think it's that close, huh?
I do. I think that they're going to be good up there in the Dakotas this year, and I think Oklahoma State is a team that I'm high on. I think that game could be uncomfortable. And for whatever reason, Oklahoma State always seems to play 1 or 2 of these games every year against like McLean said, a lower classified team that is way closer than it should be, or they lose. Last year it was South Alabama. A few years back, it was Central Michigan. I think this is the one that's close for them this year.
It's also a credit to Gundy that he can adjust in season and turn it like that. Last season looked like a disaster, and yet again they turned it around. Made some key adjustments and went on a run. But so it kind of defeats the point I was going to make. But Alec mentioned Colorado, or both of y'all, Big B and Alec, both of you mentioned that Colorado, for the sake of the Big 12, needs to win this game, needs to start off, hot. Well, Oklahoma State's considered one of the top programs in the in the new Big 12. I don't know if it would be as high profile if they lost to South Dakota as Colorado because of Deion, but it would hurt the credibility of the Big 12 if Oklahoma State lost to South Dakota State. So, I mean, it's not quite on that level because it's not Deion and the high profile, but it would be close. So Oklahoma State, I hope they win. I hope both for the Big 12, they both win comfortably. But I think North Dakota State's going to beat Colorado, and I think Oklahoma State will beat South Dakota State. I don't know about the spread. Since we're not doing that, I'm not going to offer that up there.
The thing about it is look, if North Dakota State beat Colorado, it would be bad for the conference. It just would. It would be a catastrophe if Oklahoma State lost. Even though South Dakota State is better, they're a really good team, it would be a catastrophe because a lot of people believe that Oklahoma State is one of the top teams in this conference, can compete for a conference championship. You can't lose that football game, and I don't think they will. I'm going to put the next two games together. Townsend going to Cincinnati and North Dakota going to Iowa State. I don't think either are going to struggle. I think both are going to win. Cincinnati people are furious at me because I picked them last in the conference this year, so they are absolutely furious. But I don't think you're going to lose this game. I don't think they're going to lose to Townsend, and I think Iowa State I think Iowa State's easily the most underrated team in the country for everything that they have coming back. The ability of their coach. I like Iowa State. I got message the other day. The Iowa State fan told me I need to stop saying that. He wants to be they want to be under the radar. I'm not going to stop saying it because I believe it to be true. I think Iowa State's really good, but I don't think either are going to struggle on Saturday.
I'll jump in here first. It's I'm the one who covers Iowa State. I agree with you. I think that they're kind of being overlooked, but the more like media silos I get into, the more people I hear talking about how, hey, keep an eye on them to go to the Big 12 title game, or keep an eye on them to, get a CFP bid as the Big 12's champion. I do think Iowa State rolls. There's some quiet confidence coming out of Cincinnati, Jarrett, despite Dante Corleone and his blood clot issue. Brendan Thorsby transfers in from Indiana. He's got some moxie to him. I think Cincinnati wins, but I'm kind of with B at the end of the day. I think they're a bottom tier team in the league, Jarrett.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Cincinnati wins, but I don't consider them. I can't say that I spend just a ton of time going over Cincinnati's roster, but with what I'm familiar with, what I saw at Big 12 Media Day, what I've heard, what I've read, I do think they'll probably be in the bottom half of the Big 12. Now, sometimes teams, surprise us and they come up. I just don't think it's Cincinnati this year, based on what I've seen, who they added, who they're bringing back. Iowa State, I have a lot of respect for Iowa State as a program. Obviously, I think they win, but just in general, I think Iowa State is, if I'm covering a team and they're going to play them there, like Tech plays Iowa State in November. That's a tough game. That's a game that I'd be surprised Tech wins because it's at Iowa State in November. It's early November, so that's the way I look at it. Is I won't be surprised with that coaching staff, given the success of the program, if they're in the mix in November. I would be surprised if Iowa State went to the Big 12 championship. But, hey, we'll see.
I mean, there's never been a team that is looking at making the national championship go to Iowa State in November and lost that game. That's never happened in the history of college football. So I don't know if it'll happen again this year.
Yeah, I don't think so. Next up, Kansas State. They got the second highest spread. I know we're not necessarily talking spreads, but they got the second highest spread in the conference behind Utah, 37.5 or 37. I saw a 37-point favorite over UT Martin. I don't think there's going to be any trouble. I say that I think there's going to be some jitters. I don't think it's going to be a blowout immediately, but Kansas State is notorious for playing young guys early in these type of games, and I think they're going to do it again. Get the 2s and 3s, work them in with the 1s. So the score might not be, out of hand maybe at halftime, but I think maybe 8 minutes into the third quarter, it could get ugly. I don't think Kansas State struggles in this one at all.
Yeah, K-State rolls.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of analysis on that one either. I think Kansas State wins.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. Now, here's the next game that's tricky. And Baylor fans are fired up at me. I didn't say that Baylor was going to lose to Tarleton State, okay? Relax. I didn't say that. All I said was it's a tricky football game. It's going to be a tricky football game. And I will say this. Look, everybody I think knows Dave Aranda is hanging on by dental floss to that job. I think everybody understands that. And all it's going to take is a little bit of adversity, and those kids are just they're just gonna quit. So I think they gotta win this game. I think they will win this game, but I think this game is way closer than what people think that it's gonna be.
I think
Baylor will win this game. It might be close in the first half, but I cover both those teams on more than one occasion. Not this specific Tarleton State team or this Baylor team yet, but man, that would be a heck of an upset in terms of talent. Let's just put it that way, generally speaking.
Can I just have a weird take about Baylor before we move on to the next one? They're picked near the bottom of the league. West Virginia was picked near the bottom of the league last year. Everyone wrote off Neil Brown, said he was going to get fired, won 8 games. They retained their roster pretty well with good NIL investment. We know Baylor's paying players thanks to their coaches and their T-shirts. I'm not saying Baylor's going to win 9 games. I'm not saying they're going to be in the Big 12 title picture. But I think Dave Aranda might save his job. Colin plays again, and I think they get off to a good start. They beat Tarleton State pretty convincingly.
Think about Baylor, the difference, because that's a good comparison, Alec, is that West Virginia's schedule helped them last year.
Yes,
Baylor's schedule is not going to help them this year, and that's where the difference comes in. But I do think if they get the 5 wins, I think Dave Aranda saves his job. He just got to get to 5. Can't be 3, can't be 4. I think if he gets 5, I think he stays. I do. I think he stays. But we'll see. But their schedule, it's not going to do them any favor. West Virginia got help. Their schedule's not helping them this year, man. So we will see. Next up, Houston at UNLV. I think this game is going to be closer than a lot of people think. I mean, the spread's only 2.5. Houston, I'm a Willie Fitz fan. I am. I like the guy, but it's going to take a minute. This is the one game that I actually think might be an upset. I think UCLA or UNLV, not UCLA. UNLV actually beats Houston on the road.
I'll take UNLV. Barry Odom had a really good debut season there. Yep. They run a really fun offense. Brandon Marion, I think, is their offensive coordinator. That'll be tough for a defense that doesn't have a lot of continuity, even though UNLV has a new quarterback after Mayava transferred to USC. I'll take UNLV outright, McLean.
I'll go Houston. Start the Willie Fritzoff era strong. Coming over from Tulane and having so much history, having so much. He kind of rebuilt programs and got them back to where they needed to be. I think the next stop is Houston, and I think he does that. With a win against a team like you said, had a good year last year, but has a couple new faces. So I think Houston gets the win on Saturday night.
I don't think it'll take very long, but the talent's really down at Houston. Dana did not recruit well the last couple of years. Especially numbers wise. And I honestly can't even think about anybody they added through the transfer portal that I'm really excited about. They do have a couple of good players, Houston, that I really like, but overall team and UNLV, just reading about them here recently, they could be a fun team to watch this year, like Alec was saying. So, and Houston isn't like a difficult place to play other than the heat this time of year. That they don't have like a huge, like all the other programs basically I could think about in the Big 12, they don't have a real huge home field advantage. So
we can get this game for $3.
UNLV is in Vegas, so humidity might be a little issue. But I mean, we were out there media days. I mean, it was 120 damn degrees out there, so I don't think heat is gonna be that much of a deal.
I like UNLV, that's a different heat, Big B. That's swamp heat.
It is a different heat.
That's humidity, man.
120 is 120, man.
That's
Lord,
true.
Have mercy, that was brutal. So, well, Jared, next up, we got Abilene Christian going to Texas Tech. I'll kind of put Southern Illinois and BYU in the same boat. I don't think this game is going to be that close. Tech is better. BYU is better. I think both of them win, Jared.
I do too. I mean, there's a lot of former Red Raiders, including their previous defensive coordinator. He's the head coach, Abilene Christian. Keith Patterson, he's a good guy. He's a good coach. Maverick McIver was a quarterback who was in the program for a couple of years but never saw the field, or at least not a lot, except for a mop-up duty for Texas Tech. They have some other nice pieces, but Tech should win this game like a lot of these other overwhelming favorites. They should win this game, or it's kind of like you said, what are we talking about? They're not anywhere near, in my opinion, either of the Dakotas in terms of FCS teams. So, yeah, I do believe both the Big 12 teams should win in these cases.
Yep. I'll take Texas Tech. They better not lose to an overmatched opponent back-to-back years in week 1. BYU. Their quarterback situation terrifies me, and they were not very good on the line of scrimmage last year. They're going to be Kalani Sitake, I think, is a fine coach, but I'm concerned for them this year. They'll beat Southern Illinois and Provo, but I don't think it's going to be a great year in Provo.
I think it could be another long year of acclimation. Just the talent level going from the Mountain West to the Big 12 was on display all year last year. And obviously, the last game of the season, Oklahoma State went to double overtime and they almost beat them in Stillwater. But I mean, for the most part, that just the talent divide was just not was wider than you'd like it to be. And so I think it's gonna be another learning year for Taki
Yep.
and the Cougars.
Yeah, physicality for BYU was a problem. Just wasn't up to snuff physical wise. Two more here. Arizona hosting New Mexico. Arizona State is hosting Wyoming. I think Arizona handles that one, but Arizona State, Wyoming. I don't want to bring up anything bad that happened last year, Jared, but I think Wyoming goes to Arizona State and wins.
Well, it's not in Laramie. That's a big difference.
No, it's not.
It is. And, Tech, they did blow that game. They were up like 21-0 or 21-7. I can't remember how it started exactly, but Arizona State is, again, they're not going to be good this year, more than likely. That's a tough one. What's the spread on? Anybody know what the spread on that game is?
6.5, Arizona State.
Yep.
I sound like such a degenerate, but I promise I have a spreadsheet open in front of me. I'm not a gambler.
He's like, well, my parlay, man, I would take Wyoming in the points. You know what? I'm going to take Wyoming straight up, even though it's being at Arizona State. I don't know. That's a completely different conversation, to be honest.
All right, I'm high on Arizona State compared to consensus this year. Going to make a weird comparison to Lance Leipold's first year at KU. They won at Texas late in the season in his first year in 2021. They played hard throughout his first season in 2021. Arizona State did the same thing for Kenny Dillingham last year under tough circumstances, not having postseason eligibility. Really close game against Washington, beat UCLA, I believe, with a really creative game plan. I think that they have taken a step forward talent-wise, continuing to build through the transfer portal. Kenny Dillingham is a wise coach, smart guy, runs fun things, great energy. I'm a Kenny Dillingham stockholder. They start off 1-0.
Oh, at home, yep.
I believe in Kenny. I think they're doing a lot of the right things, through the portal, through recruiting. But I think they're still a year away from being where they need to be. I think Wyoming does go into Tempe and get that win. Similar to how you're talking about Houston not being a huge atmosphere. Arizona State similar. They did not have a crazy atmosphere last year. I went out there for OSU and Arizona State, and there were more Oklahoma State fans than Arizona State fans on Saturday night. So it's going to be not a huge atmosphere, not a huge home game advantage, home field advantage. But I think Wyoming goes in there and gets the Power 5 upset.
Yeah, I'm a Kenny Dillingham fan. I am. I just don't think it's this year. I think it's next year. I think they're still building. I think they're a year away from competing. It's one of those schools that I think they got a chance because people will support them. I mean, they got a huge alumni fan base that's out there. They just need something positive to talk about.
I just think they're going to get to a bowl game. I don't think they're going to win 8-9 games. I just think that they're going to look better. I think they've got a good opportunity to get to a bowl game. Everyone's talking about how hard their non-con schedule is with Mississippi State in week 2, Texas State on the road. I think there's a very real world where Arizona State starts 3-0.
Could be. Last game, obviously, and I think the most competitive game, clearly in the Big 12 Conference, Penn State goes to West Virginia. Look, I have said this all along, and I will start off here. Penn State, I am not a believer in Penn State. James Franklin, I think he's a good coach, but he does a lot of things that just at some point you got to be able to beat teams better than just Nebraska every year. You can never compete with Michigan. You can never compete with Ohio State. Now that's saying something because those teams are really good. I'm just not a believer this year. I need to see it, and we could never see it. I think West Virginia's riding high. Call me a Big 12 homer. That's fine. I think West Virginia wins the game at home.
So interesting fact, and James Franklin's contract is he's only allowed to lose to Michigan and Ohio State. That's like in his thing for Penn State. So I don't think Penn State has much of a trouble with West Virginia this weekend. I think it's not a blowout, but I think Penn State will be winning the game. They've got good linemen. They've got good on both sides of the ball. They've got good skill players that can compete against the Michigans and Ohio State without actually winning. But I think they're further ahead than West Virginia is at this point.
Right.
I think West Virginia's strength this year is running the ball. Garrett Green, Shaheem White, CJ Donaldson. I don't think they're going to have much success doing that against Abdul Carter. I do question Penn State's ability to get vertical with some of their question marks at receiver, despite bringing in Julian Fleming from the portal. West Virginia, we'll keep this close, but Penn State doesn't lose games against teams that they're supposed to beat very often. James Franklin goes on the road and gets a win and starts 1-0.
Yeah, y'all said it. I want to pick West Virginia, be kind of the Big 12 homer. They're at home. That is a tough place to play, great environment, but I like Penn State, just their overall talent to win, and some of the limitations that West Virginia has, like Alec was saying, offensively.
It'll be interesting. Again, I'm high, maybe not super high on West Virginia. I'm just down on Penn State. I think that's what it is. I think Penn State's one of those teams that benefits from being in the Big Ten, and everybody says how good they are every single year. And then when they get, like last year in the bowl game, I shouldn't say last year in the bowl game, but previous years we've seen them just not be as good.
They lost to Ole Miss in the bowl game.
Yeah, they did. They got smacked around by Ole Miss last year in the bowl game, didn't they? That's right. So it's just, I don't know. It's just, I'm just not that high on Penn State. I think West Virginia at home, they keep it rolling. So, well, hey, man, I want to thank all of you guys and Mike as well for joining us. First edition of Big 12 Insiders Game Day. Had a lot of fun. We'll do this as many times as you guys can come back. I promise I will have you guys back, man. So we appreciate it. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Football.
Yeah,
Right,
you'll have fun this weekend. Yep.
Football is back. I'm going to be watching it. I'm probably going to end up getting a divorce because I'm not even going to go downstairs. Basically starting tomorrow. So it'll just be me, the dog, food, and a bathroom. That's all I need, man. That's all I need. So we'll be good. So holler at you guys, man. Thank you.
See you guys.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.